said, we really want to make sure that you're engaged in this conversation, that you ask questions. We'll make time for questions at the end of each panel. And I am very well known for making sure people ask some questions. I am very comfortable with silence. And so if I just straight look at you, I'm hoping one of you will raise your hand, please, because this really is the opportunity to do that. I also want to make sure that you know who the members of our team are. I know that I mentioned the two earlier. We also have some other staff who are out in front. We also, of course, have Omar. Mary Beth is here from Homes and Community Renewal. We are so lucky in that the way that we implement this program is really community up, but also recognizing your community has a diverse set of needs, and you therefore need a diverse set of expertise. And so we really work with our partner agencies to make sure that you're getting the breadth of expertise that is needed. And so this program is partnered with Empire State Development Corporation, with Homes and Community Renewal, NYSERDA, the state's energy agency, who's been working with us for the last few rounds, and sometimes DOT comes in. It's really based on the projects that you have and who might need to be supporting you through that effort. And the other part is, it's really, while it's helpful to have my name and reach out to me, community development is really from the ground up. And so sometimes it's less about brass and it's more about people knowing where you want to head and them being constantly aware and thinking about how they can help you do that. And so that's why it's also really important that you take the time to build relationships with our regional staff. The strongest partnerships are the dynamic ones between local governments and the state's planning team. And it is through that network of effort, and I always like to give shout outs in general to planners because we are that type of industry that often performs miracles that no one knows about just because we come in early and we really just try to help. If there's a way of describing that, I told my son, I got my master's degree in ways to help communities, and that's the only way I can really describe urban planning. The Office of Planning, Development, and Community Infrastructure not only administers the DURI and the New York Forward, but we also bring new life into communities through the Brownfields Opportunity Area. We revitalize waterfront communities through our LWRP. We support sustainable and inclusive planning and zoning through our smart growth programs. And we improve and restore shoreline communities and ecosystems through the Ocean and Great Lakes initiatives. And somehow we pull them all together into a cohesive whole. All of our programs support the DURI and New York Forward in communities in one way or another, as you'll hear from some of our panelists. And in order to make sure that we're providing an abundance of training and informational materials to you, we also, in the last two rounds now, and will continue into the future, we're so fortunate that Governor Hochul provided the resources that we needed in order to provide that one-for-one technical assistance. I have to tell you, many agencies have long talked about local capacity challenges and what that means in various different ways for local governments, but it really was Governor Hochul who said, yes, provide the resources so that we can provide that one-on-one assistance, not after the competition is over, but beforehand. And that really has been instrumental for some of our smaller communities, but also some of our communities who, quite frankly, might just be in the middle of a transition. They have a sense of where they want to go, but they don't have the staff with the expertise that they need in the moment of developing that application. And so that one-on-one technical assistance is available. We kind of have like a budget mind and need with our consultants, but we have never been in a position where we had to turn down a community because we ran out of funds in order to provide that. So really want to encourage folks to do that because that is really a rarity, to have pre-application technical assistance on developing your application for a competitive program. So please make sure that you do that. The other thing that we've been so fortunate in these programs for is I can't think of one mayor or a town supervisor who has turned down a question or an ask from one of their neighboring or fellow municipal leaders who are trying to figure out how to put forward the best application possible. So I really commend all of the previous winners for all of these programs. They have really made the time to be there for their peers. So also take advantage of that. And truly that's why we pulled this panelist together to you today, to make sure that we are building a real strong pipeline for next rounds of applications. It is competitive. We wish we could do all at the same time. There are so many times where we wish we could afford multiple communities in one round. But I will also just say that us knowing the application process itself gives us an insight as to where you're trying to head. And so sometimes we can support you in other ways until you get to that larger award amount. So every single step of the way is of high value. As you probably know, the former Secretary of State, Robert Rodriguez, and I have traversed the state several times. In fact, visiting DRI and Near Forward communities, touring projects, doing ribbon cuttings, groundbreakings, meeting with local officials and interested parties, and listening to their stories. And so this forum is an opportunity to share those stories, both the opportunities, the challenges, and sometimes the creative improvisation that is needed with you. Their stories and experiences have proven helpful and insightful for the former secretary and myself, and I hope they're also useful to you. So starting with our wonderful first round of panelists, I'm so grateful to have Watkins Glen Mayor Lori DiNardo, Elmira Mayor Dan Mandel, Cornell Mayor John Buckley, and Montour Falls Mayor James Ryan. So we're going to start with our host, Mayor Laura DiNardo. Your community had a vision over 10 years ago embodied in Project Seneca. With the help of the DRI, you're continuing to realize and even expand on that vision. How have you been able to put the many pieces together over the years, accessing so many funding sources along the way? This park and facility, for example, received support from both the LWRP and DRI. And how did you prepare for the successful DRI application and implementation through those efforts?
That's a mouthful.
I'm sorry. I mean, look at this place, right?
Yeah, I would say there was a lot of planning. Judy and I didn't mention this earlier, but I was a village trustee, one of the 5 individuals that were on the team to win the DRI, and then became co-chair of the local planning committee. And so to prepare when I had no idea even really what it meant was pretty incredible, but it came about with a lot of public input, number one, people like Kristen Van Horn, who's in the room. We all have strengths. What I found in going through that process, I learned an incredible amount, but we all have strengths and we all pull together with those strengths to build a program and projects for our community. And, as I said earlier, walking down Franklin Street and looking around Watkins Glen and what we have accomplished, with that support is just amazing.
Yeah, I love that notion of, your team, the diversity of your team and pulling on your strengths, both from an asset perspective, a land asset perspective, but also a people asset perspective. Next, Elmira Mayor Dan Mandel. Your DRI application is a case study in project synergies and the interconnectedness of housing, infrastructure, public spaces, and economic development. And the West Water Street mixed-use development, which we'll hear more about later, with the complementary improvements to Clemens Square, are great examples of an anchor project supported by an inviting and accessible public space and streetscape. Can you expand more on the importance of these projects, their synergies, and the many public improvements that connected up your projects in your downtown?
Sure. When this DRI came available, I was just elected, so kind of hit the ground running. I had a wonderful community development director. She's here today, Jen Miller, and she started putting this plan together with this 100 West Water Street project. It was shovel ready to go, and we started getting together with other community stakeholders and putting our plan together. Drew up our plan with 100 West Water and the other infrastructure projects that we wanted to do, and we submitted our application, and lo and behold, obviously we received that funding. What's occurred afterwards is just amazing in the city of Elmira. 100 West Water is a remarkable building. We've also done our parking garage in the center of town square, and it's brought in additional money to our downtown. To walk through our downtown now from where we were 10, 15 years ago it's a remarkable change, and it just keeps growing. And we're finding that a lot of businesses are coming to us, a lot of them come to Elmira because of what they've seen, and a lot of that has to do with the DRI. It was a lot of planning. A lot of our stakeholders, both STAGs of Interior Economic Growth, as well as some of our business leaders in the community, all came together to come up with this plan. And for me, I feel it's been a complete success, with one hiccup that we had to go through COVID when we were trying to finish all of the projects, but we overcame that as well. So.
Yeah, it's such a great example of your team creating the strategy that allowed you to marshal forward and really march that strategy forward when you came in. I have to say, it's projects, leveraging projects, and that steady sort of constant focus that you had was really critical.
Yeah, thank you. And like I said, it continues today. So.
Excellent. Cornell Mayor John Buckley, I've heard you're fond of Hallmark movies. Tell us how the DRI has evoked similar sentiments in your city, and talk about the role of public infrastructure in gathering spaces such as Union Square Park and your downtown revitalization.
Yes,
And now we all know that.
I am a fan of Hallmark movies, and I'm not ashamed to admit it in public. When I'm looking at the DRI or other projects in the city of Cornell, and I've said this before, I want to make downtown warm, welcoming, and inviting, right? And I guess that kind of parlays into the whole Hallmark feel. To get a taste of that, I invite you to the city of Cornell during the Christmas and holiday season. You'll certainly see it up close and personal. DRI, for me, I think one of the big things is to right off the bat get your community members involved. It's important. It's so important to get their feedback, and certainly their buy-in. Whenever you undertake something as large and expansive, such as a DRI. Because there's so many different components and projects, whether it's on the public sector or on the private side. It's so important to get the buy-in and have residents come in and just so they have an understanding. Change doesn't come naturally to a lot of people, especially when you have an aging population. It's why are we changing this, and why are we spending money on that? And well, it's always been that way, right? So it's really important to kind of tell the story of what the vision is and share that vision. For me, I look at the DRI as table setting. So we are right in the middle of our DRI. Our downtown is kind of tore up right now. We're doing the sidewalks, alleyways, streetscape alleyways, public arts, wayfinding. All of those components are going on right now as we speak. As you mentioned, last fall, we completed the brand new Union Square Park. Going back to the 1970s when I was just a little kid, Cornell underwent a huge project under urban renewal, and the city was basically split in half by a newly developed 4-lane. And I think we lost upwards of 200 homes all those years ago to put that 4-lane in. But part of one of the key components that the city lost was the original Union Park, which was right across from what is now City Hall. And we really lost that gathering space and that sense of community. So one of my favorite projects was the creation of this new park, which was just built in the nick of time. We had a series of events this past fall, Christmas concerts, which was attended by 300 people. So just to activate that area and have that gathering space is so vitally important to our community. But going back to the table setting in the downtown area, we, like many communities throughout our region, we're experiencing somewhat of a resurgence, and by having all this new infrastructure, making it more warm, welcoming, inviting, more walkable, it's more conducive to doing business. It's more attractive to those young entrepreneurs or existing businesses that want to expand and invest in their properties. One of the key components is the existing building owners trying to open their eyes to the opportunities. We were very aggressive early on, trying to recruit applications, on the private side, going door to door, talking to the building owners and telling them, hey, there are opportunities here. Submit a project. We will help you. We'll give you guidance and in doing all of those things. But we're, like I said, we're smack dab in the middle of our projects. It's very exciting. It's very busy. It's very time consuming, but it is so worth it. And I'm just so happy. And I do have to say one thing, Mayor. It's always a pleasure to be here in Watkins Glen. And as a car enthusiast, I'm here quite a few times throughout the year. Whenever they have open days at the track, and my wife and I certainly usually make a day of it and go to the restaurant. It's always a pleasure to be here in the beautiful village.
Thank you.
I love the layering of it, right? Which is engage your community as much as you can early. Then give them a park quickly. Give them a finished project quickly because you're about to rip everything up and they need to know what that vision is in the end to overcome the grumpiness of construction everywhere. And then also a meeting place for the community to come together. So thank you so much for sharing that layering. Montour Falls Mayor James Ryan, your community worked closely with Watkins Glen, forming a productive and collaborative intermunicipal relationship. And now you're moving forward with your New York Forward Award. You are the only one on the panel that received a New York Forward. So what advice do you offer to communities that are looking to pursue a New York Forward over a DRI? And can you talk a little bit about your public outreach to generate support for your projects and applications?
Well, thank you. And just to let you know about your Hallmark, our falls happen to be on one of the Hallmark startups. I just want to let you keep an eye out for it. When I was actually approached about the New York Forward, it came to me from my now deputy mayor, who said he was talking to Kristen Van Horn and said, we really should do this. And I said, okay, we'll talk further. And since becoming mayor, I've always been trying to empower and inspire the people on my board and in my community to take these projects and start to go full run with those and bring me back the parts and pieces and we'll tie them together. And that's exactly what we did. We put that out there. Judy was involved, Kristen was involved, and they started to introducing me to some other people who might be interested. We brought them all to the table. We had our core committee, and from that core committee, we expanded it into our community. And with the public engagements, which were helped by the contractor. If it wasn't for the contractor and all the input we got from our advisors, I couldn't do this alone. Montour Falls is a small community with 1,760 residents. And I have the same problems as a large village or a large city or a smaller city. I have the same exact problem. I just have to do it with less money. So $4.5 million was a lot of money. And I said, we are not going to stop until we win. And we did. It was great. But it was, with one clerk, I said, I can do this. And we did it.
That's really remarkable, and it really is true. There are so many communities, I'm sure, in the room who have applied several times, and again, we really do wish we could do all of these things a lot more quickly and award more communities. And so now I want to open it up to some questions from the room to our amazing panelists.
I'm going to use the mic because we're recording.
Kurt Anderson, Ithaca Area Economic Development, also a resident of Montour Falls, right down the road here. I know many of you in this room. As a project manager, so Keisha, you offered a really nice piece of advice actually. You meant it tongue in cheek, but is get a quick visible win, right? Put it out there in front of the folks, let them see or at least have a better grasp of the vision. What would the folks on this panel, Mayor DiNardo, Mayor Mandel, those funded in the earlier rounds, you put your proposal in, best laid plans, right? And then reality, finding the money, getting the projects approved and done. Would you offer any advice on, have you been on the timeline that you proposed? I've not read your proposals, but have you stayed on that timeline? What were the delays and how would you advise those that are working through that project to marry the ideal to the real?
So there were definitely hurdles and that people didn't have, we went out to try to get the projects underway. And if individuals didn't have projects that were really ready, then we stalled, from money to facilities to lots of different things. But I would say the planning process, we were working so closely with our state entities that they helped every step of the way. So even if we had a hurdle, we worked through it. It doesn't mean we got everyone done, but there's a number of individuals in this room that have invested in the private sector. So for every dollar that the DRI provided to the community, and Judy knows the figures better than me, the amount of private money that came in for enhancement and improvements and economic development was enormous. So, you know, there were definitely hurdles. It was more about, you know, making sure that people had plans and projects ready to go. And, you know, one example that I can think of where the state was really instrumental is that New York State DOT was doing Franklin Street. So they were redoing the whole street, the sidewalks, the brick. And we realized that in the DRI, one of the public projects that we wanted to fulfill was to do new lights down Franklin Street. Well, the DRI money wasn't quite, we weren't ready. We had just won, and the timing wasn't quite right. But I will tell you, I look back there at Julie's suite, because we worked together, and guess what? We had those sidewalks dug up, and Franklin Street was, you know, it was a horrible construction project, talk about dust. People were complaining, but what we did is we were able to get those lights ahead of the project finalizing through the DRI, and thank you to Julie and all of her team. So that was just one example that I could think of that, you know, we really worked to figure out, you know, what are the bumps that we're up against, and we've already got, you know, the DOT was not really part of the DRI, but we were working with our partners, again, it's a state entity, and we were able to get those new lights put in at the same time as why we wanted to dig up the sidewalks again, right? So that was a perfect example of where we were able to complete that ahead of our other DRI projects.
Look at the checkered flag sidewalks, crosswalks, and there was a stroke of genius too. So
That's pretty cool, they need to be repainted though.
As far as Elmira goes, our major project, the 100 West Water, was done pretty much on time. It went very well. Andy can speak more about that later when he has his time to speak. We did run into some hiccups with our riverfront project. Originally, we wanted to put a walkway near the dike wall, and we got shot down by the DEC. They had a fit over it. So we had to go back to the drawing board on that. So that was one hiccup that we had to overcome. The other one was the parking garage. We actually had a problem with the contractor. We had to go back and forth with them. Finally, we got that completed. It was a very difficult process for that particular contractor, but that didn't get done in a timely fashion like we wanted to. Clemens Square, the other project we had, went fairly well without a problem. And then our other major project was our walking bridge, and we actually went into TAP funding to help supplement our DRI funding. And of course, with COVID, pushed some of our projects back. One of the other things that we invested in was activate building funds, and we found that a couple people didn't follow through with the funding that we were going to give them. So we had to drop that 10 punt, so to speak, and then reallocate those funds. But overall, I think with the planning and everything that we did, everything went fairly well. But you do run into those hiccups that are unseen. So I just thought people just beware and actually saw what if this doesn't go through, and have a backup plan, because that's going to happen. That's going to happen.
Iowa County, Village in North Valley. Is there a population minimum for a DRI standard? I have actually two questions. That's the first one.
So I'll answer that. We don't have a population minimum. The DRI, is really looking for a community that can use more than $10 million worth of funds. So I think that's just one thing, and have projects that are somewhat ready. The other thing that we did to make sure that we were supporting not just smaller communities, but also the ability for us to be looking at regional pulls and micro-regional pulls, is we opened up the DRI for more than one community to come together and to develop an economic development future, a revitalization future that leverages the strength of each of those communities. So not looking to do the same exact program or same exact type of projects in each of those communities, but rather how the 2 or 3 of them together create a microeconomic regional draw, so that we can leverage off of each other's strengths and go after the bigger pie. Otherwise, smaller communities tend to apply for the New York Forward, and that's traditionally based on the amount of capacity and the development interest of projects that are able to move more quickly, and making sure, that you maintain that momentum, for your residents and your businesses. You do what you say you're going to be, you're able to do what you say you're going to do, and so that's how most, I think, communities manage which of the programs to pursue.
Thank you. And then as a follow-up then too, we have a vision. When I say the village board and other people we depend on. And so to the mayors out there, how did you get that vision across, and was it successful?
For Montreux Falls, I kept the village board from day one when we brought the idea to be applying for the New York Forward. And they were included in all the emails, I included them in all the information. I kept them totally transparent what was happening, and worked with them to help me develop the team that we put together in the end, and we're going to advise us on which direction our New York Forward would go after we were selected. It was a process that started at its infancy, and get your buy-in early, because you do need your support all the way through this project. And even now that we're waiting for the announcements, the board will still be as part of this as much as the committee.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about vision, it's important to involve everyone, from your board, from your council, to your community members. Certainly if you have a city planner or a village planner, that person will be heavily involved. But also, I think it's very important not to be locked into, certain ideas. There are times when, I'll come up with an idea, but I'm not locked into it. Someone else will take it and say, hey, Mayor, I see where you're going with it, but have you thought about this, or have you thought about that? So I think you have to have an open mind going into these things, because the visions can be fluid, right? They can change over time. So I think you just have to have an open mind going into it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And also another very important thing when you're developing your plans, try to look for projects that are shovel-ready. So, you can hit the ground running. It would actually, I believe, help your application by having shovel-ready type of projects.
Please.
Really prepared, yeah. Hi, Robert Patamo from the City of Ithaca. One of the things I'm really interested in hearing about is how did you approach ensuring that you were getting non-traditional voices in the planning process? I mean, I think at the local level, we all know there's a strong correlation between, folks who have time to engage in municipal policy feedback and folks who this also impacts but don't have the time to take and have a really involved voice in that planning. And I would just love to hear your experiences on how you've been creative in maximizing that input.
Yeah, I would say in Watkins Glen, one of the pieces of our process that I was really proud of, the amount of public input that we had was over the top. And I think Julie would agree, we've talked about this a lot because she's done a lot of communities, that we scheduled community open public forums and had open sessions. We used a lot of sticky notes. We wanted all of those ideas out on the table. Doesn't mean that we did every single project or every single idea, but that involvement with the public, I think, made us that much more successful overall.
Yeah, in the city of Cornell, we had something very similar. The process that is, we had more public engagement meetings than I can remember. It was almost, speaking of the sticky notes, our setting was almost like a game show. We had all the different projects up on the board, and the public would come in, and we would talk about each one, and then they would rank them, which ones are the most important, which ones they liked, and what they thought about them. So we got a lot of feedback from our community, and so we knew kind of what was important, what they liked, what they didn't like, and that was very beneficial to us.
We did the same thing, similar in Elmira than what Montour did, and City of Cornell. We did basically the same thing. I think the biggest thing is make sure you get it out there through the media and to the public. And that's always difficult. Make sure people know and everybody in the city knows what's going on so they can meet.
If I could just supplement, just knowing other communities too, the composition of the local planning committee and what their networks are is really critical and important. Some communities, literally do events at parks to make sure that they're getting the youth input. It's really, and the consultants can help with that, but so much of that really is working with each of the communities to think a little bit further out on the reach. Sometimes it's different hours, different times. During COVID, the pickup of virtual engagement really helped to bring in people that would not have been able to just traditionally make it into the city hall. And so we maintained that I guess we're calling it post-COVID, right, where a lot more things are in person like today, but still maintaining that virtual presence because that really does allow more people to participate in different ways. Pop up, if you're lucky to go through it and you have good weather, doing pop-up farmers markets, things like that. So there is a wide range of those touch points that community engagement.
Hi, I'm Tom Knipe. I work with Mayor Cantamo as the Director of Economic Development for the City of Ithaca, and we'd love to hear from the panelists, in your experience, both in the application phase and now in the implementation phase, what's in your mind is the ideal mix of private projects and public infrastructure projects to achieve your DRI vision?
Interesting. Because as the private projects are coming forward, and I was looking at them start to unfold, I would tell my committee that I would forego a public project to make sure a private project is going to be successful, and that those private dollars would be invested into the community, because later tax dollars may be able to be funding the project that I have in mind for the public side. I was always looking at balancing the projects as they came forth and the value of those projects. And I think one of the last decisions we made were the public projects. Before we even put them on the table, because I wanted those private projects to flourish, because I believe that's what the New York Forward was for.
I think this is where the local planning committee really comes in, and as the projects are being submitted, private or public, the local planning committee has so much input in looking at those. And as Mayor stated, some of the public side projects, they can be accomplished through other means and other funding agencies down the road. So there is, I think you do take the private side and look at that a little harder, just because for some of the private sponsors, this might be just a once in a lifetime, once in a generation opportunity for them. So I think you have to give them a little bit more weight. I will say, although each community, we certainly face some of the similar struggles and challenges. Each community is unique and different, so each community does have a uniqueness to them, and certainly their needs would be unique as well.
And we actually, our main project was a private project, the 100 West Water project. We wanted to make sure that they received funding so that could become a reality. And so investing in the private was paramount for us in our DRI.
Yeah, I would say it definitely was a balance. And that local planning committee is key to that, because there were definitely projects that we had, both on the public and private side, that weren't quite ready or didn't benefit the community the way maybe we thought they should. So sometimes we had to weigh them to figure out, how we're going to spend $10 million is a wonderful chunk of money, but you start doing projects, it goes pretty quick. So it's definitely a balance.
And I'll just add a little bit in, because every single community kind of does it differently. Some only want to do public, some only want to do private. On the programmatic side, what we're looking at is how the projects knit together to create a real boost for revitalization efforts. And so there's never, it's not really the position where we fund all public or all private or all nonprofit, right? It's really, how does that vision how do these projects come together to make that vision real? So just want to throw that out there, because it is very interesting seeing the project list development throughout all of the DRI and New York Forward communities. You really get a sense as to that's where the difference is, the localized differences in how people look at public dollars, so it starts to shine through. Any more questions? Oh, okay. So we're going to move over to the next panel. We're going to go straight into it. So again, if anybody does need to use the restroom, please just feel free to do so. And thank you, panelists. Please stay up here. Sometimes I'd like to cross over questions. Our second set of panels is focused more on stakeholders. And are you up on that? No. Okay. Sorry. And so we are going to start with you, Andrew Bodowitz. Thank you so much. Sorry about that. I was driving alone today, so I really didn't get my chance to do all the prep work I normally do. Andy is the partner and co-founder of Park Grove Realty. Andy, you're a developer, and you've done a great job with Mayor Mandel's signature DRI project, the West Water Street. A key to a quality DRI or New York Forward application is proposing real projects that are ready to move forward, not just aspirational ideas or concepts. So what advice would you offer to communities as they demonstrate readiness of projects in their application? And would you please feel free to talk about some of the bumps in the road and how we pivot?
Well, yeah, thank you. I think the key to DRI and any project, and particularly with a project like a private that we did, and that developers are looking to do, and this is always true whether it's a DRI or I think any kind of community development project. It's just so critical to build that rapport with the local government and the community. And I can't say enough about our experience, particularly on the 100 West Water Street redevelopment, and working with the mayor, the city, and Southern Tier Economic Growth, and the county, and the state. And it was really a joint effort. And these things are, we finished the project in 2019. I think we started working on it in 2015 or 2016. And it's even harder today than it was then. So, the economics are tough in terms of how to make this is a market rate development with market rate housing units. The economics are very, very challenging to make a market rate project work and be feasible in many upstate New York communities. And without that local support and having that working collaborative relationship, it would have never happened. And that working relationship allowed us to be ready when the time was ready and the city was ready to submit for the DRI. We early on were already working with them so that we were prepared that when they did get the award, we were ready to go. And one example would be, even before we started, the city, there were existing buildings. The site where we developed was really the former sort of retail hub of downtown Elmira. was the Harold's Army and Navy and Rosenbaum's and a few other things. And the buildings became in such poor condition that the credit to the city that they recognized, and we talked to them a little bit, that, hey, this would really enhance things, and our ability to move quickly would be much better if these buildings were gone. And they did secure the ability to demolish the buildings. They were in fact historic at one time because the Harold's building was an Art Deco building. But given the condition, they were able to secure the ability to demolish it. And so things like that, working closely with the community, we were ready to go and hit the ground running when they received the award. And that was just a huge help and a big factor. And as far as hurdles, I think, there are many hurdles. I think they're really more significant today. It's a much tougher environment to develop anything, given construction costs and interest rates and all that. But one thing I'll say that the state of New York in supporting the 100 West Water and housing in general and DRI is really critical, because across upstate New York, the one thing we've seen, and we developed throughout upstate New York, we developed market rate, we developed affordable housing, we developed some commercial stuff, that the one thing we've seen is that almost all, if not all, of the upstate communities, there's a real need for newer, nicer market rate housing, and that really draws people in. And as a lot of folks in the state government and private sector and in the development agencies are trying to recruit companies to come in and create jobs, you can't really fill those jobs unless you have good places for them to live. So, upstate New York's competing against other parts of the country where they have more to offer and more things to attract people to go to. And so one thing that's really important is having a good housing stock. And I think that we've seen that in the West Water project, that's really enhanced, the ability to get, for example, the LECOM project came in, which was the medical school close to our project. And that's really kind of worked together hand in hand as people come into town that want that kind of housing. Now it's there. So anyway, I think that it's really important to work closely. The public-private partnership is so important. And I also say, and then I'll wrap up, I also have worked with Mayor Buckley and the folks in Hornell, and they, along the same lines, just very willing to form that private-public partnership. And that's what it takes to get these things done, and to get them done successfully. It's what is good for us as a private developer and good for the communities as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for those reflections. And really, there is such a good value in that public-private partnership, and seeing what the vision and the future that the community wants, and then figuring out what are the things that you may not think about that need to plug into it in order for it to actually be real. And so finding some developers to work on that, to be in a partnership with onto that vision and solve problems with is so important. On that note, happy to introduce Dave Hart, President, CEO of Hart Hotels. Thank you so much for all of the work that you've done in Watkins Glen, the Guthrie Building and Hotel Fitness Center projects. Guthrie, though, is not the beginning of your involvement in this downtown. Your Harbor Hotel was a much earlier investment and it's beautiful. What attracted you to Watkins Glen back when you decided to build a hotel? And how do you see that and other previous investments as catalysts for a successful DRI?
Yes, thank you. Nice to be here, everybody. So we do have a long history here. Our investments in Watkins Glen. The Harbor Hotel opened in 2008, but we were considering building on the current site all the way back in 2003. Just so happened, though, that my partner in the project, Peter Krogh, Krogh Group, Peter owned the property in Watkins Glen and was looking for the best use for it. It was not used at all, other than a little summer market, vacant property along the lakeside. So Peter's owns a construction management company out of Buffalo, Krogh Group, and I, of course, am in the hotel business, developer operator. We had a harbor hotel in Portland, Maine that opened in 2002, and Peter had suggested, well, is there a lodging opportunity in Watkins Glen? And I would just tell you, I mean, it's a very long story, but quickly, when we did the market study for a select service hotel, no restaurant, no meeting space, nothing aspirational, just a commodity, the market study came back and said, well, you would do great for 6 months out of the year, and the other 6 months of the year you would lose what you made in the first 6 months, or the middle 6 months. And so that made no sense because it's a small market, it's a market that doesn't have a lot of demand generators that we look for. And I'll circle back to that issue in a moment. So it was actually Kelsey Jones, who was one of Judy's predecessors at Scope, suggested, well, what we really need is a destination hotel that has full services, dining, inside, outside, meeting space, because we didn't have this beautiful facility back then. And you know, we went about working with a variety of public partners that helped us pull together the capital stack that enabled us to make a significantly greater investment in that site. And the Harbor Hotel was born. Harbor Hotel for us is Harbor Hotel number 2, the first one that we partnered with for the Crow Group. The demand piece was, however, it was revealed in the first market study, is that, of course, we all know about WGI and Watkins Glen Raceway and the impact that it has on so many folks in this region economically, visually, recreationally, etc. What we didn't know at the time was that while the promotional side of that business is the big races that are held there, the 3 or 4 races a year, what we didn't know is that the track opens about this time every year and closes in mid-October, and every day of the week when it doesn't have an event, a big racing event, it's being rented out to track clubs from around the world. And those folks that use that track, they don't come here for one day, it's multiple days, and voila, demand is necessary. And so we uncovered that in the first market study, and to this day, Watkins Glen International and all the folks that use that track, whether it's the big racing team, which you watch on big race weekends, or the folks that are bringing their cars, vehicles from around the world, they are our biggest customer. But then we realized that between the growth of the wineries, being in the Finger Lakes region in general, and all of, I'm biased as all hell when it comes to the Finger Lakes region, I'll just tell you. But because we have other hospitality businesses in the Finger Lake region, it's just a jewel of New York State. And a lot of what we built into was demand that was already there, which was just unaccommodated in various facilities at the various north and south ends of the various lakes that you know across the state. And so it wasn't so much build it and now come, because we're already here, we're traveling through, it was build it and now stay. And so part of our approach was to answer the need of the traveling public. From there, so it's really good. I mean, I will just say for our 2 projects related to this panel, which are what we refer to as the old VFW building, because that's what it was when we built the hotel back when opened the hotel in 2008, and the Guthrie building, because that's what it was when again when we built the hotel in 2008. It's easier to do those projects when you have a really successful project that is a footprint in the community. And I would just echo the comments previously that we worked really hard to create kind of a symbiotic relationship between village government and village residents, town residents. Because when you're in the hospitality business, there's only so many guests and customers. And so those customers and guests that I think we did a reasonably good job with accommodating, whether it was dining or lodging or both, over the years, helped us immensely when we went to the various boards and asked for either kind of a no-brain idea to get approved, or inevitably a lot of projects have some issues about when there could be zoning It could be, size, and it could be a variety of other things where the village board, the zoning board has to weigh in. It does help when you kind of laid your groundwork early on, and we're fortunate to have that as kind of a baseline for us.
Yeah, I love how your statements alongside Andy's really talks about the shared successful future between public and private sector, right? As well as, this opportunity that communities who, do see a nice upsurge in visitorship and sales tax and things like that during a particular part of the season, but not year round. Our goal for some communities could be a future where they start out as a New York Forward community. They're able to build enough amenities year round and draw in different attractions or knit together those attractions that work in the wintertime. And then can actually be a future DRI type of community, right? So it's really sort of the building blocks. So thank you so much for those comments. Next we have Bob Brazil. He's the Director of Community Relations and Development at Racker. Bob, you represent a not-for-profit organization which is an admiral and has an admiral and bold vision, which is to help people have good lives and to change the world, educate the public about people and disability. And you receive funding from the DRI, but your program and project does not exist in a vacuum. You've become something of a hub for the community itself, educating and supporting the community, moving the revitalization process along, and connecting up multiple funding sources, and serving as an emergency natural disaster center since it's located on higher ground. In other words, lots of moving pieces and playing multiple roles for the community. So how did you weave them all together, and how does that affect the revitalization of the community?
Well, it was a lot of the panelists have talked about partnerships and teamwork, and that's what we really focused on. So when we started this project, it was in 2018, and we looked at what were the needs for Tioga County, one of which was the lack of space for nonprofits to be able to perform important work that they do, but also do it at a rate where they can put money back into the programs. The secondary thing that Tioga County faced, and particularly the village of Owego, was catastrophic flooding in both 2006 and 2011. So as we spoke to some of the other nonprofits around and found out what their needs were, what kind of their pains were, we found out that we could reduce the amount they were paying in rent to about $5 a square foot. They could reinvest those into programs for vulnerable populations. And some of the partnerships we developed with those nonprofits had different parts of the community. Some were food banks, some were financial security, some were veteran services, job coaching for people with disabilities. We figured that if we had one centralized hub for all these people to come and receive services in the center of kind of the county seat of Tioga County, which is the village of Owego, that would be the most important part of it. We were able to acquire a piece of land or parcel of land in the village of Owego that was above the 500-year flood zone. It was kind of the one parcel of land in the village that didn't flood in those two different areas. And so it was proposed to us by Tioga County Economic Development and the legislature that this might serve as a nice resource for people if they're displaced during flooding. So as we weaved those partnerships together, it became the DRI. We started the village of Owego just when the DRI at that point in time. And we got more input from both Tioga County Economic Development, our partners with the nonprofits, and we were able to develop a plan to be able to make sure those services could happen in that facility. We also received a secondary grant from the Mother Green Health Foundation at the same time, which allowed us this project to move forward. And so with the input of Empire State Development, the Regional Economic Development Council, the DRI, it really put us on the right track.
Thank you so much for that. It's I just have a few words just on resiliency and sort of planning for your downtowns. For those of you who are your downtowns were often, many of them were set up by the waterfront, right? And so we have sort of this risk factor. It's one of the challenges, and one of the things that I point out to communities, not only for this program, but for other programs that we have in the state, is to also really look at your downtown areas. We do have a secondary commercial strip that is outside of harm's way and forecasted further in the future to start moving some of your investments there. And that is a storyline and an argument that you can weave into your investment and strategic plan. So the Department of State does have some resources to help with resiliency planning, of course, but in terms of economic development, we really do have to think about these things responsibly. And it's great that you were able to have that site that you purchased that was in a safe place. But also, I just find in Southern Tier, North Country, some of these regions, the entrepreneurialism and the innovative partnerships that develop out of need is something that many other regions can really learn from. So thanks for playing that multiple role and recognizing that there does in fact need to be a space for all these organizations to come through. Next we have Orlando Rodriguez. He is the owner-chef of Craft Wine and Cider Bar in Watkins Glen. Orlando, you're not originally from this area, so what first attracted you to settle and start a restaurant here in Watkins Glen? And can you talk a little bit about how the DRI contributed to your business, both directly with project funding, but also the revitalization effort surrounding your business?
So, I'm originally from Connecticut, but actually, I think it was like in 2007 I came up, right before the Harbor Hotel was built. One of the reasons I
love pulling people from other states.
One of the reasons I was brought up was because the Harbor Hotel was being built, and the people that I was working for were very concerned about it. So they were looking for a chef, and I came up here. We were at that point in my life. I had 3 kids. We were looking just to get out of the city life because it was just growing immensely where we were, and housing and everything was just chaotic. But anyways, and then we had a 4th child when we moved up here. But once we came up here, we fell in love with the area. I accepted that job, and one of my things that I always wanted to be was an owner and give back to the community and be able to give back to the people in the area. So I had the opportunity back in 2019, end of 2019. I ended up buying a Craft Wine and Cider Bar, very small restaurant at that point. I saw the growth for it, and then with the ERI, I was able to grow it more. So that was the fortunate thing. We are a place where we support mostly local. We only serve beer, wine, and cider from the state of New York. Food-wise, we try to buy everything locally. We deal with a lot of farmers, a lot of cheesemakers, everyone. So that's one of the things that we're proud of, and that's what we thrive on. I see a lot of faces here that come to our restaurant. So we have a very tight community. We open year round, so we do get a lot of people and a lot of faces that come to our place, which we're very grateful for. So the DRI for us, we saw that we were outgrowing our space, and then I did get approached a couple times about DRI. I was very hesitant about doing it because I was just a new business at that point. Originally, the goal was to put a new roof on it and do a couple little things, and then I got convinced that we should just grow it out, and we did. The funny part is the roof never got done because it happened during COVID, so it's just a lot of things going on with the whole roofing. Because it's a rubber roof, and there's a lot of things going on with that part that we just couldn't do it. The parts weren't getting. They had to use certain parts to get it warranted and all this stuff. But anyways, long story short, it never got done. But over the years, our project technically finished like in 22. Really didn't. I think we ended up finishing most of it like in paperwork-wise like in 23. But it's definitely bought. I thought I was going to be able to hire like maybe 2 or 3 more employees, but actually I doubled the capacity of employees that we have, which I love seeing the people that work for me grow. So I've had some people go off and grow. I've seen people, purchase houses, purchase cars, but the thing is, it all comes back into the community, and that's what we love about it. That definitely, that helped us out in the DRI part.
Yeah, now that I think about it, I do recall hearing that there's this great, wonderful wonderful restaurant and we're hoping that they will expand. So I'm glad that you not only did that, but, stayed the course through COVID. A lot of restaurant projects really stalled and, I think there was a fear of continuing expansion and construction. And I think part of that, I'm assuming that part of the confidence to move forward is based on the local-based support of people who, love to go to your restaurant. So
And that was a strong part of it, I think if we didn't have the local community support that we had and all the people that come in during the off season, we definitely wouldn't have made it. That's what makes us be able to be there and be able to be open year round.
excellent. Thank you so much. So we have a wide variety of perspectives and industries on our panel, and I'd like to open it up to questions.
I don't have a question, I just have a comment. This is to Orlando, we love draft.
Kurt Anderson again, Montreal Falls, yes. We love draft for multiple reasons. One, the food and the ambiance is great, but we talked about Watkins, the comment was made about the track, I think David mentioned that, but we live by the track. They're running every day, and it runs hard from April to October. And when we first moved here, we're waiting for the tumbleweed to blow down the middle of Main Street in December. But Graft is one of those places that is open and inviting, and it's just, I do think Watkins is going to be open more and more and more through those seasons, particularly as our climate changes. This last winter was very mild. But Graft is definitely one that is our favorite, and I've been happy to share the news of it with these folks next to me right now. Appreciate it, thank you.
Hi, Heather McDaniel from Ithaca, New York. I have a question for maybe Andy or David. I know, Andy, you mentioned that there were a number of funding sources that went into your Water Street project. Can you elaborate on, some of those funding sources and how you were able to, for lack of a better word, cobble together to make the projects work?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Heather. It's a great question, and I think it always takes a whole lot of different funding sources. And on the West Water project, we had obviously DRI, which is a significant component of the DRI that Elmira received. I think we received about $4 million in total of the DRI, and the project had already received restore money. I believe it was $2 million that had been. The idea was to restore the old Art Deco building, and the problem was really, one, you couldn't restore it, and two, it wasn't really a viable way to get the apartment units that were needed in that Art Deco building. And then lastly, the building became so deteriorated that there was no way to save it. But we were able to maintain the restore award to use for the new development, and that was instrumental. So the combination of the DRI and the restore, and then the IDA offered a pilot, which was very important and critical, and Southern Tier Economic Growth provided some additional build-out money for some of the commercial tenants. One of our big concerns from the beginning was, could we really fill 16,500 feet of commercial in downtown Elmira? And we felt pretty comfortable and confident that the housing units would do okay or would do well, but we were nervous that we could fill 16,000 feet of commercial space. And Southern Tier Economic Growth provided some build-out dollars for the tenants' benefit to essentially allow us to have some way to attract commercial tenants to downtown Elmira, and that was instrumental as well. So it was just combining a whole lot of sources, obviously private financing as well, mortgage financing and equity, and I think it's even harder now because, as I alluded to, the construction costs are so significant, and interest rates and the interest carry during the interim period when you're building a project are so much higher than they were back then. So it's even more important, and I think that the state and Governor Hochul have clearly done a good job in recognizing the importance of housing, and I think investing in market rate housing too is so important. Often it's easy to say we need affordable housing, and we know there's a lot of state programs that fund affordable housing. But market rate housing is really important, and it can't be done in most of these communities in upstate New York without some state assistance. And I think that the governor has really pushed for that, and I think it's really important. And clearly the state was instrumental in this project getting done. We would never have been able to do it, nor would any developer have done it without that state and local support. You have different thoughts there, Dave?
I Heather, nice to see you. Heather and I work very closely together on a hotel in Ithaca. So our challenges were not funding and financing. Ours was all private equity combined with the grant, of course. Our challenges were more figuring out what to do with buildings that we strategically said that Peter Krogh and I needed to own because of the proximity of the hotel. That's A. And then B, COVID created a significant lag time between what we would like to do and when and how we could do it. And so that was just a reality everybody dealt with in their various business lives and personal lives. So that was just a timing thing. But the issue of what to do with these buildings was, I mean, we were all over the map. When you buy something and say, well, we just need to control it, like the old VFW building, which now we refer to as the Village Loft, it was on our lot, but it was a separate deeded interest right on the corner of Franklin and First Street. When the VFW business went bankrupt, Peter and I just decided we needed to own that building, and we bought it without a plan. And the Guthrie building, the Guthrie Clinic, I think they went out of business in 2017, and somewhere in that 2017, 2018. It had sat vacant for a couple of years before they put it on the market. And again, Peter and I said, well, we just need to own that building across the street from the hotel, but without a plan. And so when we applied for the DRI grant that is in place right now, the plan for the Village Loft building was 3 floors of a day spa. Because we were looking at, well, what can we do to add demand services for our very successful hotel business, because there wasn't a spa. But then COVID hit, and that started to make less and less sense. And then coming out of COVID is when we bought the Guthrie building, and then we said, geez, between Governor Hochul's, mission on housing and the reality of the housing needs in this marketplace, then we started to turn towards multifamily. But another key piece of the Village Loft building was adding the fitness center on the first floor. The building is 3 floors, 2,000 square foot each roundly. That did add a very, very nice amenity for the hotel guests, but it also, and this is part of the working relationship that we had, with the state and of course the village, is that we would make that facility not just for hotel guests. And so there's community memberships as well, a quality of life business for village residents in addition to hotel guests. And it created some opportunity to repurpose the space in the hotel for revenue producing areas. So our challenges were different on the capital side, but they were more entrepreneurial, opportunistic, and timing for us.
I love the war stories. I have a question for Orlando. Smaller project. How, I know the state process moves as quickly as it possibly can, but it takes some time from the time you submit your project and you're ready to go until you get your project done and you get reimbursed for that state funding. How did you bridge that funding? I think particularly for a smaller project that can be difficult. Can you speak to that, or even one of the bigger projects if there was some bridge financing, how you manage that?
I managed it with some personal funds, but also my bank lent me some funds also. So I told them what we were doing, they were excited about it, so they backed me up. So that's how I did it. That's pretty much it.
More questions? Maybe the quiet side back there.
I do have a comment I would make. In talking about housing, it's very important for communities to have that pro-housing community designation. I think in the city of Cornell, we were one of only two, and Harris, you might know this, I think we were only one of two in the entire county of Steuben Bend to have that pro-housing community designation. But that certainly helps unlock the door to some of these funding streams that we're talking about today, whether it's DRI, New York Forward, certainly helps with Restore New York. We're trying to piece some of these different programs together to make certain projects go. But that's certainly an important thing going forward. And it's relatively new, so some communities might not have an awareness of it.
Thank you so much for raising that. I think the thing too that's really important is, how does the development world know that your community has a vision that they might be able to help with? And I will say I've met several developers, especially housing developers, not just affordable, but at all levels, that literally say we just kind of follow who the DRI and your forward winners are, because their plan lays out, their application laid out, that they recognize that there is a need. Oftentimes that need is talking about, not having enough for people's, children to stay. They want to make it attractive. They want whole communities to remain like that. But it really is true. The application process, the plan that lays it out, is not only sort of a roadmap for developers who are trying to figure out, where to invest their time and money, because even scoping out a project costs money. And I think that's especially the case now with the increased, not just the increase on interest and challenges on getting more creative lending solutions, but also on, sort of workforce, right, in order to complete the construction projects. We're glad that the state has been giving out a lot of grants and awards lately, but that does start to make a strain on the amount of workforce that's there to build projects. And so I think that is one of the questions maybe that folks may have in the room that maybe you all can just answer, both on maybe the hotel and on the restaurant industry, which is, how do local governments who recognize that there is a hotel business or there is a need for additional housing, how do they sort of sell that the need is there and can demonstrate that there's a population that's coming in? How do they weave those stories together? Like you said, you only look at when the racetrack had its highest events, and you didn't really sort of peel back the layers. How might local governments help bring those smaller layers of interest to you? And I guess on the restaurant side, how can communities encourage businesses that maybe kind of feel like this is good, we're fine, we don't really need to expand, we make as much as we want, but they're looking for that restaurant to be a little bit more of that regional sort of attraction, and maybe expand a little bit because the community really does believe in its future. And then a hotel and on the restaurant side.
Well, for us on the housing side, it was more a revelation once we were looking for the best option of how to use these buildings that we acquired with no plan. And I would say that, the revelation I mentioned about, the governor's initiative with housing, but we have, let's just say, full-time equivalent employment is a little over 100 jobs, but there might be 130 or 140 people on payroll. The combination of seasonal and part-time associates. Our payroll has now grown to over $3.5 million annually. We do, for our managerial positions, we do need to recruit from outside the community at times for specialty positions. Chefs, of course, general managers, salespeople. And so, just like, a lot of businesses are experiencing, say, yeah, I would like to work in this, for your business, your hotel, and I would like to live in the community, but I can't find a place to live. That's either
right size, right price, right location. And then all of a sudden you hear that from them, and then we're going outside of our building envelope, which was the hotel, and we're doing something around our hotel, which I refer to now as a hospitality campus. And then we realized that creating housing inside these buildings that we didn't know what we wanted to use, in adaptive reuse, answers two things. It gives us the best market opportunity for return on investment, and it creates a situation where your associates now all of a sudden have a place to live. And interestingly, some of the folks here took a tour of our two projects today, and they know that Carolyn Geyer, who is our very valued general manager of the hotel, she lives in one of the loft apartments. And so that's a perfect example of how we put the two together.
Yeah, it was really remarkable how much the DRI housing units that have been invested in is filled by existing community members. There really is such a strong and healthy appetite across the state. And again, I think the businesses flourish when there are people who are there full-time, and people there full-time come from people who live there. I know that Judy's not up here, so I'm just going to make a little bit of a shout on, where do tech businesses, how do they figure out where they want to locate? They figure out where they want to locate based on where they think their employees will be happy and stay, and they can recruit more people into. And so that's why you hear such a heavy emphasis on housing, because they need somewhere to live, and where they live is where we can invest into restaurants and parks and better, all of these sort of quality of life amenities that kind of come with it. Especially too, people who will eat at the restaurants. But yeah, can you speak a little bit too about what local governments can do to help strengthen too, I think, their encouragement and support for their businesses, like restaurants,
On the restaurant side, I mean, we've been a little fortunate, but most of our employees that work for me they're local. So I've been fortunate in that and they've been pretty much long term. Some of them have been there. This is our 5th year, so some of them have been there 4 years, some of them 3, some of them a year, but a lot of them have been with me for a while. Yeah, housing is always an issue, yes, especially what I know in Watkins, and that it's not just Watkins. I think it's the whole region up here. You always hear people saying, "Oh, I would love to live up there, but there's not really much." And people ask me all the time about housing, is there an apartment for rent? But if there is one, I do tell them. But and people tell me about the ones that are going to be for rent. So it's just one of those things. But for sure, it is a growing community. Like we've said, I've seen it grow over the years. Going on 16 years, and it's definitely grown between wineries and restaurants and hotels. But then there's also there's places that have developed. I know that there's a section over there where it's mostly housing that was built, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, I think. I can't remember, but so I think that's been helpful also. So.
So let me just raise another topic along the lines of what you asked. So, and of course I'm biased because I'm in the hotel and the hospitality business and tourism business. I guess is my coverall. I have been in the business my entire life. I'm a 10-year member and multiple chairman of the Convention and Visitors Bureau in Erie County. And so I take a look at a variety of different perspectives as a collector or generator of the occupancy tax, and then where those occupancy taxes go. In this particular county, a significant chunk of it goes back to selling and promoting our industry, which I think it's the number 2 industry in New York State. And I'm not sure what number 1 is, but I can tell you it's number 1 in my heart. And sometimes it's hard to, because at the state level, between the governor's office, the state, the assembly, and various constituencies, and we have a big, varied state with lots of voices.
we forget how important our industry is. And while COVID was, really a horrible situation for many of us, it did reveal how important it is for the economy of New York State because so much of our industry was closed. Like we were running for 90 days. We basically had two or three rooms rented for 90 days during March up to through May and June of 2020. Until we all kind of got our hands around what the issues were with COVID and what you could and couldn't do safely. A lot of that was at that time mandated by Governor Cuomo. So when our industry ground to a halt, all of a sudden we realized how the economics of our industry just drains out of the economy. There was no collection of sales tax, no collection of that tax. There was no payroll. Like everybody was on unemployment, which was being paid for by either the state or the federal government, a combination of both, as we know. And that is, and so then all of a sudden we realized, hey, hospitality, tourism, restaurant business, hotel business it really is a big thing in New York State. And so I would just say that to not forget how important it is, an industry is, as the economy has now strengthened and gotten back to normal. Here in Schuyler County, it is the #1 industry, right? And, it's a complementary industry because, if we host, let's say, 25,000 guests a year, which is about, actually it's more like 50,000 if you consider that most of our 25,000 rooms are rented to double occupancy or more. Now they're not all unique because there's multiple night stays, but those folks, well, I'd like to say, hey, we've got the perfect mousetrap, and what they get there, they'll just stay in our hotel and they'll leave. Right? We're not running a casino there. That's Las Vegas mentality. We're actually a place where people come to visit, but they want to explore. So next thing you know, they're out on Franklin, they're at different restaurants, turnstile businesses, they're up at the track, they're doing the right things, going to the wineries, and then, my terminology is, the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. One guest staying overnight in Watkins Glen at the Harbor Hotel, all of a sudden, that one night with their head on that pillow generates a whole bunch of wallet opportunities for a whole variety of people. So maybe if we get a breakfast out of them or a dinner, they're out doing other things. And that is all part of the tourism economy.
Excellent. Thank you. Any questions?
It's more a comment. I'm really disarmed, and I'm kind of an old gal in the economic development field. But I worked many years in Corning and many years in Ithaca. And what I remember, and I'm not seeing it so much here today, the large industries were always invited in. I'm talking Corning Incorporated and Cornell. You see the racetrack here and some of the other. But even the hospitals were invited in. And I'm just wondering, what does the state do to really bring in the major employers who say, this is what we are looking for our employees? There was a group I worked for them many years ago called Corning Enterprises. It was a division of Corning Incorporated. And when you talk about quality of life, that was their initiative. And you don't see that so much anymore. And I'm wondering if the state is, talking to the really large employers in the southern tier, like Corning and Cornell.
Yeah, so I'm not the best representative of that, but I am an ambassador for that. And that is because this is why you see words like placemaking, revitalization, community development, and planning being wrapped around every discussion on economic development and how we bring in some of these bigger institutions. Because what they are looking for is, and where to locate is, where will my employees be happy? They, of course, would like to come into a place where the workforce is readily available and trained, but they also recognize that their best opportunity to recruit is in a place where there's space for their employees, so housing, also a thriving downtown so that they'll be happy there. Not everybody wants to be in a super major city either. And so that's the beauty of the diversity of our state, is we have different scaled communities for different needs, and we have some of these more city centers, but have these beautiful other downtowns. And that's why the DRI New York Forward and New York Forward adding on was so important, recognizing that there are some folks that will want to travel a little bit of a commute so that they can give their family or individually a different feeling. Outdoor recreation is actually very much picking up in terms of recruitment because the younger workforce and the aging workforce is really much more outdoor centric than they used to be. And so that's honestly, I think a while ago, $200 million in total towards this type of a program where we don't guarantee that the money is creating jobs because the program is designed to bring the industries, but also to make more whole and happy existing residents. Because our best recruitment is actually our people. And our people, when someone goes out to a restaurant and sees that other people are happy and they're walking around, they're getting their ice cream, they're going here, they're going there, that really is a huge recruitment effort. And so a lot of the scouting is looks more like people coming in from out of town just to see what it's like, as opposed to looking at where's a big plot where I can put my building. And that really is the call for it. So the DRI and New York Forward focuses on knitting together multiple types of activities based on what the local government, but based on what the community is asking for, that is at the scale that they're asking for it to be. But we do push on certain principles, like we talk about housing, because we know that that is an important component to that. Even if that's not the first thing that people are thinking about. Going back into, this is what we want, okay, let's look at all the nodes of activity that needs to happen to actually get that vision realized. It's not usually one or two things. There's usually a bunch of things that play around it, and then multipliers that speed out, past that initial corridor or community. Any other questions, thoughts?
I would make a comment, in regards to economic development and bringing stakeholders together. What we do in the city of Cornell through our business improvement district, Chamber of Commerce, and Cornell IDA is throughout the year we have a series of meetings, we have a series of mixers and dinners, just bringing everyone in the same room, getting together, and not necessarily to hear from speakers or things like that, but just to have conversations one-on-one. What are the needs? What is your vision? Where are we going with certain things? And I think having those stakeholders together and having those conversations really fosters collaboration. And I think you can really move your community forward doing so, but you really have to have those interactions to accomplish that.
Any other questions? I don't know if is that a hand with glasses? No? No. All right, we'll switch over to our next panel, which really is focused on answering your questions with regards to the application, selection process, presentations, and things of that nature. This is getting even more technical, but I really want to thank our panelists for taking the time to spend here today to help the rest of the region in their application. Thank you all.
Minutes. We're just going to switch out the panels.
We're going to move into the application workshop. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for not eating all the cookies. I'm going to take one for the ride home. I'm Paul Byer. I'm the Smart Growth Director for the Department of State, very involved with the DRI and New York Forward. Both programs really are the epitome of smart, sustainable growth. We've got a panel of folks that are deeply involved in administering the DRI New York Forward and reviewing and scoring applications. They have a lot of insight. They live this program daily. You know Judy, REDC. A lot of talk about public and private partnerships. She represents the gold standard of public-private collaboration. Mary's from HCR to talk about co-housing, housing component. Omar from ESD facilitates the process of scoring applications and implementing projects. And we have our DOS revitalization specialists, Julie and Allison, to answer any questions you have. So let's start off. Judy, you've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. What would you tell future applicants to focus on and even to stay away from in their applications?
The good, the bad, the ugly. So I think that the good is that it's an opportunity to pull together all of the right stakeholders. And I say the right stakeholders because you have to be very diligent about that. So that would be those that you think can influence your the success of your project, those you think will detract from it, because you need to get them on board. So when I'm going to give a shout out to Kristen Van Horn. So when we were putting together the LPC, who should be on the local planning committee, that was put together before the application was submitted. And it was done as a defensive move as well as an offensive move. How's that? And it was done because we thought that once, if we didn't do that, that you would have all of these property owners and individuals who had some political clout that would want to be on the local planning committee that really shouldn't be there because they were self-serving. I'm just being straight up. And so what we did, right, Kristen, we talked about it. So we made sure that the LPC had a nonprofit, it had the arts represented, that it had a resident that everyone loved, that had been around, who born and raised here, who could sort of, tell people, calm down, it's not so bad. And then we had a new resident, and then we had a small business, and then we had our largest employer on it. So we made sure that we had as much as we could, every element within our community represented. And that was in the application. I think the other thing that we did was we started talking to different groups about their projects and potentially their projects. And so when we were doing this, and we also looked at it from a data perspective. What would these projects mean? And probably the most important thing was we knew this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and that's what I would say to you. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And so we knew that it had to be leveraged. So leverage was so important that whatever we did, it wasn't about a public project we were very focused on private projects initially, because that then will allow you the tax revenue to be able to do the public projects in the future. So it was definitely around leverage, transformation, and being really looking at what we need to do to be year-round. It was about being a year-round community. How's that?
Know that you flipped the equation and jumped ahead of the DRI process and formed the structure
Yes.
through the LPC.
And I have recommended that anyone who is applying,